Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to talk today about choosing shrub for home landscape. One of the reasons that I put this topic on the agenda was because of what happened last December. We went from 66 degrees to -6 degrees in 12 hours. It was quite a shock to everybody, including the plants that were out there. The plants that were affected were primarily the plants that still had leaves on them. And they were primarily the plants that were still conducting photosynthesis. That would have been primarily your broad-leafed evergreens. That would have been, magnolias weren't affected as much as I thought they would have been, but the camellias were, your myrtles were, your acubas were, that hellebores were, anything that had active growing material above the soil. Now, if the growing portion of that plant was below the soil level, usually they were fine. All of the hellebores recovered with no trouble whatsoever. Actually, it seemed to invigorate them. But the other plants suffered dramatically, especially your acubas, your camellias, your loropetalums. What else, guys? Crepe myrtle. Well, I think the crepe myrtle might have been the multiple frosts that we had, not just that one. Boxwoods, sorry, that was one of the big ones. And boxwoods have a tendency to, once they're affected by damage like that, they don't recover nicely as well. Boxwoods have a tendency to hang on to whatever damage. It's like they're offended, and they're going to stay offended for a very long time. So we're going to try to get you, these are flowering plants. These are flowering plants that I'm going over today. If I tried to cover the evergreen plants and the deciduous plants, like the needled evergreens, like your firs, your spruces, if I tried to cover all of them, you'd be stuck in this room with me for a couple hours. I don't know that that's what you had in mind. So we're just going to go over some of the flowering plants. Choosing shrubs for home landscapes in Middle Tennessee. First, native shrubs. Native shrubs are better adapted to local climate, don't require as much fertilizer, not invasive within their native range, food source for wildlife, nectar and host plants for native butterflies, attractive to native honeybees, and also non-native honeybees. There's a variety of beautiful species to choose from, and many are easy to grow. Number one, beautyberry, Calocarpus americana. The beautyberry shrub flowers in the spring and the summer. In the fall, right now, those beautyberries are fruiting where their flowers were. That's that nice purple ring that's around the stem of each beautyberry. Beautyberry very rarely gets above 7 foot tall. The branches from the beautyberry arch. You can prune it judiciously, it doesn't require severe pruning, to keep it at a shrub size if you so desire. So if you want to use it as something around the foundation of your house, you could do so. It's not extremely fast growing, but if you did prune it hard, like really severely pruned it back, it would probably recover once it's established. So it's a wonderful plant. It does drop its leaves, and it'll drop those little berries too. However, it's not invasive, and the wildlife loves those berries. I'm not sure if wildlife loves the leaves or not, so I'm not sure that the deer would decimate this plant in the summertime. It is a possibility. It's food for wildlife, beautiful purple berries, and it's native. I saw on the way in here for the first time in my life a deer climbing under a fence rather than going over the top of one. So I used to always think that deer went over. That's not necessarily the case. And these were full-grown deer, so I don't know, guys. I don't know. Next is the eastern redbud. The eastern redbud is usually a small tree, full sun, part shade. It will grow in shade in the woods, though it will get leggier, it will get longer. Anything that's not exposed to the same amount of sun that it would like, is going to get long looking for that sun. That includes all plants, not just woody plants. In the early spring, the branches don't have leaves, but they're covered with small purple flowers. And they are a harbinger of spring in this area, followed by heart-shaped leaves. You can get exotic eastern redbuds that are a lime green or a burgundy red. They are still in that nice heart-shaped leaf. It's not a glossy leaf, it's a dull leaf. You see them in landscapes all over the place. The green leaf eastern redbud is the most vigorous of those three. When you choose a redbud at a nursery, don't hesitate to pull the root ball out of the pot, because they're very vigorous growers, and any plant that's stuck in a pot, when the small roots hit the walls of that pot, and they don't stop, what they do is they're looking for nutrition, and they'll hit the wall, and then they'll start going in a circle, and they'll go in a circle. And what happens is, once they start going in that circle around the inside of that pot, it's like they're stupid and they don't know that they're supposed to go out in another direction. So when you put them in a hole, they just keep going in that circle. It's called girdling. They'll exhaust every bit of nutrients in their immediate area. They won't have the brains to go out further and get different nutrients. You won't be able to fertilize them enough. You won't be able to give them enough food, and they will eventually die because their root ball is just stuck right there. If you just want a plain old redbud, take my email, get my number, come to my house. I live in the woods. I got plenty. You're welcome to them. But if you want the green ones or the purple ones, if you want the exotic ones, they are available. They're expensive too. Fringe tree, my favorite. Chionanthus virginicus. It's a small tree. Usually it's under 10 foot. Full sun, part shade, 12 to 20 feet. Oh, I'm wrong right there. Rich, moist soil, though it will tolerate drought once established. The one in this is anecdotal, this is not UT-TSU information, is I have one in my front yard, and I never water it, and it did just fine. Didn't even look pitiful all summer long, and it's a native plant. What you see as flowers are not actually flowers. That's the tendrils that are left on the flower after that blooms. It blooms in very late spring, and it's the one tree, small tree, that you could put in your front yard or your backyard, and everyone that walked by would say, "What is that? What is that?" So if you want a conversation starter, this is it. Witch hazel. It's a large shrub or a small tree. It exists naturally near stream banks, so it likes a moist, humus-rich soil. You can get a native version of this, or you can get an Asian variety. The native versions of this usually are yellow. The Chinese or Japanese versions are usually a much prettier orange. But again, I'm going with natives here, so this is a nice yellow. The wonderful part about this tree is that it blooms in late winter. So you get winter interest, winter, early spring. So again, we're going for stuff that's going to pull your eye and lift your soul, because nothing else is blooming, but this is. Oh, I forgot to mention, let's go back. Sorry. The fringe tree. They have recently found the emerald ash borer. We used to think of it as just a pest for ashes, which it has destroyed many, many, many ashes in this country, ash trees. Now it's attacking the fringe trees. If you, the only treatment we have for that is usually it's a before treatment. You treat it before you get it. It's called a systemic pesticide, and in this case, it's one called imidacloprid. C-L-O-P-R-I-D. It's a systemic pesticide. When you see a D-shaped hole in the trunk of your tree, kind of, usually it's round, it's round on one side and it's flat on the other. So it looks like it's shape of a D. That means that that insect has infected your tree. It's crawling around on the inside of the bark, destroying the vascular tissue of that tree, and the tree will die pretty rapidly. You'll probably have to have depending on the height of the tree, you might have to have an arborist administer it. Usually it's administered as a drench on the roots and the rest of the tree. There is a caveat. Systemic pesticides kill every insect that utilizes that tree for any reason, which includes honeybees. So it's your tree, it's your yard, it's your choice. I'm not going to recommend one way or the other. You know, those are decisions you make, not me. Spice bush. This is a cool tree. If you grow in a place where you have ample soil depth, it will get some size on it, 6 to 12 feet. It has a spicy scent, which is kind of fun. It has pretty little flowers, but they're not that significant. So though it likes mostly shade, it will take some sun, but it likes mostly shade. It's tolerant of clay soils, it's tolerant of wet soils, and it's the host plant for swallowtail butterflies. This is a fine plant, you know, but you make the decision. It's not going to be, the flowers don't last forever. It's not going to be real showy. It's not like a magnolia. It's not, but it's still a good plant. Camellia, this is not native. Camellias are not native. They prefer shade to part shade, and they prefer, in Middle Tennessee, they prefer protection. So if you have a spot where your yard and your yard is in a sheltered area, say between two wings of your house or your garage and your house, to where this will get mostly shade, but be protected from drying winds, especially in the wintertime, this is an excellent plant. Again, this plant will eat, there's two different species. One flowers in the fall. The other one flowers in the spring, and you get to pick which one you choose. The flowers look a lot like roses, multiple petals, drop dead gorgeous. It flowers when other stuff does not, so it's even more precious. I can't recommend them more highly. They like acidic soil, so you're going to be hitting the soil with some method of acidification. Either the fertilizers that carry acidification or a whole bunch of lemonade. It's up to you. I'm teasing, but yeah. Well, when I get lime slices, I always put them underneath my plants that require acid. Okay, no teasing. That's right up there with the mushroom talk. I won't do it anymore. And fall and spring bloom period, it's 6 to 10 foot tall. The further south you go, the bigger this plant will get. In Mississippi, they reach a nice size. Azalea. There's two kinds of azaleas in this area. One is your evergreen, which will bloom and keep the leaves green throughout the year. Usually it's a glossy green, and it keeps those leaves right up to the fall. There's one azalea that's a evergreen that's called Encore. It will give you a big flush of flowers in the spring and another small flush of flowers in the fall. They're usually a hot pink, but there are other colors. There's another azalea that is a native to this area and to primarily your rocky areas in the mountains. That's a deciduous azalea. It's usually a yellow or an orange, and the leaves fall off of it. It blooms one time in the spring. The leaves fall off in the winter. The deciduous azalea has a drop-dead gorgeous scent. If you're ever of a mind and you want to see both types of azaleas blooming in the springtime, Huntsville Botanical Garden, I can recommend that. That's not a business. Huntsville Botanical Garden has a magnificent azalea garden, and you can check it out. It's not far away. It's really great. They're shade or semi-shade plants, shallow rooted, 1 inch of water per week, and they like acidic soil. Now, it used to be that when people in this area, especially landscapers, planted azaleas, because they're supposed to be shallow rooted, they would put them in the soil with 1 to 2 inches of the root ball out of the pot exposed. No, no, no. That plant knows what depth it needs to grow in, and it's not with its root ball up outside of the soil. If the plant's growing, put the root ball in the soil. I'm not going to say bury it extra deep, but put the whole root ball in the soil. You'll find plantings of, well, you won't find many left because most of them died. I think that was so they didn't get too much water, or the soil be too saturated. Azaleas do especially well on a slope where they get good drainage. Similar, same family, rhododendrons. Acidic soil, pH of 5 to 5.5, protection from drying winds, but they'll take a little bit more sun, and slopes are best again. Part shade, filtered light. And their flowers occur more as a clump on the terminal tip of that plant. So rhododendrons are fine. I used to live in Natchez, Mississippi, and when I'd go outside in the springtime and look down the street, it was just like living in the middle of an Easter basket because of all the azaleas and rhododendrons. Holly. There's lots of hollies. There are evergreen hollies. There are deciduous hollies. There are hollies with leaves that have sharp thorns on the very tips that you hate hollies forever. There are hollies without berries. There are hollies with berries. So there's a whole plethora of hollies from which to choose. It needs a pollinator, so it also needs a source of pollen. If you plant, you can't just plant one holly. And you got to make sure that the other holly you plant, if you want berries, is a male. So you can plant as many females as you want, but you make sure you plant a male too, because that's the only way you're going to get colorful berries. There's nothing prettier in the wintertime than an evergreen holly with berries on it. It just screams Christmas. It's great for flower arranging. It's great for gifts. They're used regularly around here as landscape plants around the base of your houses and your businesses. And that's another point too. We used to have ugly houses with ugly foundations, you know, critters going in and out, rocks. We have really pretty foundations now. If you don't feel like you have to put in landscaping plants around your foundation unless you want to. It's kind of a cultural thing. It's up to you. Berries provide food for wildlife and winter interest, and the soil is slightly acid. There are fertilizers that will acidify your soil as little or as much as you want, or you can also use sulfur, but you can control the acidification. If you're concerned about the pH of your soil, for $20 now? $20? Okay. You can get a soil test where you dig up an area, just get samples of your soil, put it in a bucket, carry it to the Ag Center. They'll help you put it in a box, ship it off to be tested. It used to be 7. That's how long I've been around. But now it's up to 20. But they will. They'll tell you. They'll not only tell you. They'll tell you what kind of nutrients you got in your soil. They'll tell you how much organic matter you got in your soil. They'll tell you what plants are likely to do well in your soil, and they'll give you the pH. These are some of the holly varieties. I'm not going to read all this. This is basically for you. It's in your documentation. Holly is a really good plant overall. It's a great genus. Abelia. That's a nice little plant. Grows well in landscape applications. Usually has flowers on it that are very nice and last the bulk of the summer. It will tolerate quite a bit of neglect, which is good because that's what I deliver. Summer to fall bloom, broadleaf evergreen shrub, 3 to 6 foot tall and wide, full sun, moist soil, but once established it will tolerate quite a bit of drought and no pests to speak of. and I gave you some of the varieties to look for. I don't know that it has any scent at all. It usually has clumps of flowers at the terminal tips that provide interest, but they're not they'll just look nice. They're not going to be like, wow. It'll just look nice. Loropetalum. The primary interest in your loropetalum, it has cheerleading pom-poms late in the spring, usually red, hot pinkish red. But they're small, they're not huge. It's also called a Chinese fringe flower, and it prefers full sun. I have one that got frosted very badly in the Arctic blast, and I prayed that it wouldn't come back, but doggone it, it did. And now I'm like, well, do I dig it out or not? Because it's been there a long time, so I know that the root system on it is substantial. It says it can be easily transplanted, but my personal one, and again, this is personal, was in a raised bed where I'd probably do damage to the rocks holding the bed up. Pruning will, let me reiterate this. Pruning may or may not. You will have to prune this plant if you put it next to your house, unless you don't want people to see in your windows. It's drought tolerant, and it does have four-season interest. I have used it in floral design, and it holds up. It holds up pretty well. Some greenery holds up better than others. This is just average. But it's got this green-red thing going on, so yeah. And the little bitty flowers. It's a good plant. Hydrangeas do very well in this area. We have two kinds of hydrangeas. One of them blooms on this year's growth, new growth. One of them blooms on last year's growth. You have to know which one to prune. You can get hydrangeas in white. You can get hydrangeas in purples. You can get hydrangeas in blues. There's different kinds of hydrangeas. There is deciduous hydrangea, which drops its leaves. There are evergreen hydrangeas, which maintain their leaves. They also climb up the side of your house. There's two kinds of blossoms on a hydrangea. One is a mop head, which forms a ball similar to a viburnum. And the other one is a lace cap, which forms a flower that comes off the stem. It's still round, but it's got little florets. The flowers that bloom in a lace cap are on the outside edge. They're actually sterile flowers. They're not real flowers. They're just petals of flowers. The flowers in the middle, they're just a teeny tiny ball in the middle. That is the flower. That's the actual flower. You'll rarely, if ever, get a seed off of a hydrangea. We also have oak leaf hydrangeas at Crossville Extension Experimental Station. They have testing for different hydrangeas, so you can see how different ones do. So hydrangea and they have sizes of hydrangeas that will fit each and every need that you might have. They'll have a size that fits close to the house, that won't impede your view or anything, all the way up to here. Or you can get great big hydrangeas that would look better out in the field. Remember, whenever you plant something with a small leaf far away from your house, the view, the landscaping effect on your brain is to think that instead of being 100 feet away, it's a quarter mile away. So it gives you the illusion of space in your living area. If it's got a smaller leaf and you put it out there, it'll pull your eye and make you think that the space you're living in is so much bigger than it actually is. Viburnum, I forgot to include this one. This is the old version of this PowerPoint. You guys got the new version. Let me see if I make sure I don't miss anything. Very hardy. There's a ton of different viburnum plants, and they do very well in this area. Little care once established. If you have to watch their size. If you get a viburnum in this area, chances you're going to be pruning if you have it close to the house and you don't want to grow it up the outside of your windows. That's up to you. Some people do want them to grow up the outside of their windows. I'd like to be able to see in and out, especially at other people's houses. Um, this post came from Missouri Garden, so it mentions Kansas City. Trouble-free and have very few pest or disease problems. They truly do not. Their foliage is not that attractive. It's not bright. It's not glossy. It's kind of dull and hairy, you know, like it has fine hairs all over it. So when you prune it, it's scratchy too. You might want to wear those sleeves that go up. Full sun, tolerate some shade, and require very little pruning if they're placed in the correct spot. Right plant, right place. They generally live 10 to 20 years, and I know that there's one in my landscape. Again, this is my personal opinion, not UTTSU recommended, but I know for a fact there's one in my front yard that's coming up on 20 years old. And if I quit hacking on it, it would be much, you know, it would be big and really healthy. Now, the beauty of the viburnum, or it's not really the beauty, but the scent. There are a couple of the viburnum species called Davidii, Davidii, and Burkwoodii, Burkwwoodii. The smell of those flowers in the springtime is transformative. You just think that you're in heaven. It's that good. So if you don't have one, try to smell one someday because they are magnificent. Crepe myrtle. Hot, humid climate. I don't know how much further north than here crepe myrtle lives. Some of you may, from further north, may know. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and there was no such thing as a crepe myrtle on the agenda. I don't know, anybody from Kentucky? Okay. My sister's from Indiana. Crepe myrtles don't grow in Indiana. You didn't have them in Michigan. Yeah. So it thrives in a hot, humid climate. The lovely part about the crepe myrtle is their beautiful trunk. The striations on that trunk give you winter interest even when nothing else is going on with the top of that plant. This individual plant is called Natchez. It'll get upwards of 25 feet, which is a little big for that spot in the island on that sidewalk. But it doesn't have a scent. But again, one of the attractive features of this plant is it's blooming in the summertime when just about everything else has given up the ghost and said, no, I'm done. But crepe myrtle is on it. For many years, it was a accepted pruning practice to cut the crepe myrtle plants back to here, which put out a profusion of growth, because anytime you prune, you encourage growth. That's why you don't prune close to the wintertime, because you don't want weak growth going. It'll die. It'll be affected by the cold. So if you want to prune your crepe myrtle, again, it's your plant, it's your call. If you want to prune it, that's fine, but the most efficient way to prune it is to just take a little bit off the edge of each branch, and you're going to get the same amount of flowers whether you cut it back to here or you cut this much off of the tips, or just leave it alone altogether. Again, that's completely up to you. So no more soapbox from me. I'm done. Magnolia. There's lots of different magnolias. The grandiflora is the one with the dinner plate sized flowers. It's got the glossy green on the top and a bronze on the bottom of the leaf. It's a great leaf to use in decorating. Again, the florist comes out, but they do take up a bit of room. The leaves never break down, so you're going to have to, they will require that you rake them up and dispose of them some other way than just letting them lie in place. They won't blow away either. You're not that lucky. They're too heavy. Winter interest due to attractive bark, many sizes, many varieties. They're drought tolerant. There are smaller leafed magnolias with a very attractive flower. They're not glossy like the grandiflora, but there are smaller leafed cultivars that are that fit in small places and are still a very attractive plant. And it's still your southern magnolia, so you're okay there. You're not abandoning the southern principles in any way. I understand. I'm kind of addicted to the whole magnolia thing too. If you want to see a magnolia and other trees that we've talked about, a few of them are on display at and easily accessible at the Oakland's Mansion. They have an arboretum on the grounds. You can walk around and all the trees are labeled. And they do have some magnificent magnolias. Bottlebrush buckeye. This is a native and it's pretty neat. It forms these brush, they do look like baby bottle brushes. Very attractive plant and flower, multiple colors of flower. Native, full sun, average soil. These don't get huge. And anytime you have rocky soil where there's not a lot of available soil for the roots to extend downward, you'll get a reduced size plant. So it's kind of like nature's way of bonsai. Nine bark, slightly glossy leaf, purple or maroon leaf, green leaf, average soil, native, full sun, small to large, and will tolerate severe pruning. White to pinkish clusters of flowers. Does anybody have any know of any good attributes of nine bark other than the fact that it's native and it is a good looking plant? And the shrubs that were particularly hard hit are some, in addition to others, the aucuba, the camellia, the loropetalum, and the euonymus. And here's my references. Anytime you're looking up stuff, I tend to stick with anything that ends with .edu because it's produced by a land grant extension type organization. And I thank you for your patience. Again, thank you.